You want to hear a story? I was in my house, my little house in Zimpetu, southern Mozambique, and it was flooding, and it started to rain, and it rained and it rained and it rained and it rained, and this is a bizarre thing, but it rained 40 days and 40 nights. 40 days and 40 nights. It just kept raining and raining and raining and raining. And everything was broken. The streets just collapsed into the middle of nowhere. And everything was a mess. And everybody was hungry and broken and desperate. And I said to God, I was just in prayer, and I said, God, what do you want us to do? And it was years ago when we were a small group of people. There were probably, we only had maybe 400 or 500 children at the time, just a little group. And we were saying, now, God, what do you want us to do? And I heard very clearly, feed 5,000 people a day. Feed 5,000 people a day. Now, Philip was asked the question. He said 7 months' wages would not be enough to give them just a little bit. The church is continuously calculating. Are they not? Determining what we can and cannot do because of what we have in our checkbook. Because of what we have in our budget. And I believe this is an orphan spirit. Instead of looking at a big God, we look at our little checkbook. And we determine what we will do or not do by the fact that we have this little bit that is not enough, so maybe we don't do anything at all. But when we look with different eyes and we see the face of the one who is absolutely able to multiply, then we say, God, what are you asking of me? What are you asking of my heart, my spirit? So the Lord spoke to me, 5,000 people a day. At that time, that was a big number. Not anymore. But back then it was. And so I said, yes, Lord. And then he said, before you tell your staff, you call the government and commit to it. So I did. I called the government. And I said, hi there. This is, I said who I was. And I said, our little organization, we're going to feed 5,000 people a day. And they said, they didn't even faze them. They said, okay, go to cashew factory in Camp 2000, Camp 2000. Just like that. They said, be there tomorrow with the food. I can't remember what we actually had in the bank. I think a couple $100 or something, because we are on the edge. You know, we're on the edge. It was years ago. We're still on the edge, but it's just a bigger edge. Shaka Baba. So there we were. And I'm praying and I'm asking God, what do you want to do, Lord? And do you know, at the same time, there in the UK, there was these people that wanted to build an incredibly elaborate, exquisite building. And they had these plans, and this building was bizarrely beautiful. It was so spectacular. It just, the architect probably cost a couple $100,000. It was just a beautiful, beautiful building that they had envisioned in their hearts. And God spoke to them, give your building fund away. Send it to Mozambique. Now, they didn't have their whole building fund. It was, I don't know what it was. They sent us, I think, about $60,000. That was a big deal for us. It arrived the very day, the day we promised to feed 5,000 people a day. And we began to buy food, and it came, and we fed all these people. And then, do you want to hear a story of multiplication? Okay, this was very exciting. Do you guys have any schools here? Okay, what are they called? Funder? Oh, okay, I like it. A creative evangelist. Go for it. I like it. You are, I can tell. You're going for it kind of people. I like it. Well, here we were, and we had a school of the supernatural something. Supernatural people. And I was very excited because I thought being a school of the supernatural, they would understand the supernatural. So I was excited about who they were, and I said, okay, all you supernatural people, we're going out to Camp 2000, and we're going to do what God does. Because God lives inside of us. So we drive out there. We bought all the bread in the whole city, which was only 1,000 loaves, because after raining 40 days and 40 nights, everything was broken. All the roads to South Africa, all the roads to Zimbabwe, all the roads were broken. There was nothing getting in or out. So we bought all the bread in the city. And we drove out to Camp 2000, and somebody counted. I love that. The supernatural people probably counted. And they counted the bread. So we got out there to Camp 2000 with 1,000 loaves of bread. Why do you think it was called Camp 2000? Very much like the Bible, they counted the men. God helped the women, but they counted the men. And there happened to be 2,000 men, and then their women and children. So there were 2,000 men and all their women and children. And I said to this supernatural school, okay, now is your time to pray. I said, you're going to give everybody a whole loaf. And they looked at me like a lot of people look at me. You have lost your mind. You have literally lost your mind. And they looked at me with these big eyes, and fear in their hearts just gripped them. Oh, she's crazy. You understand that? And I know. That's why I brought it up. And they looked like, what kind of a nut are you? They said, you know, we could be trampled to death. They could just trample us. This is dangerous. I said, I thought you guys believed me when you heard me at conferences. I know they had heard me speak. I said, don't you understand that God multiplies food? I said, it wasn't just a made-up story. I don't make up stories. I downplay stories because they're too wild for even you to understand. I said, I want you to pray and to believe and not to break the bread in half. Give them a whole loaf. They're hungry. They haven't eaten in days. And then I said, God bless it. Thank you, Jesus. And I walked off. Oh, they just couldn't believe it. What is she doing? She's walking off and leaving us here to die. I wanted to go talk to the chief. I didn't need to pass out all the bread. I fought the supernatural people, very much needing to see something supernatural. So I left him there. And I come back, I don't remember when, maybe an hour, maybe two. I'm walking around, I'm doing things. I'm meeting people, doing things. I'm in the bush. I love it there. I probably was learning some more Shangan at the time. So I walked back, and these kids were jumping up and down, screaming and yelling and crazy happy. They said, do you know what happened? Do you know what happened? I said, I imagined something good. They said, we gave everybody bread, everybody, all 2,000, all the children, and he said, look, 8 bags left over. Shaka Baba. Yay! That was cool. I meet those kids all around the world. That was about 10 years. Some of them are getting old. They're like 30 years old, 32. Those kids are growing up. Everywhere I go, I meet them. They said, do you remember that? Do you remember? I said, yeah, that was great. God wanted to bless you with eyes to see. He wanted to show you that all you need to do is look into his eyes and look into the eye of the one who's hungry. And so, what is God asking of you? This little group of people on a Saturday morning. This little group that in the eyes of the world looks insignificant and probably incapable. What could God do if one of you took a hold of his heart and saw what he sees and does what he does? What could happen if one of you opened your heart so wide that you let God break it and cause you to see what he sees and do what he does? What would happen if one person in this room started to hear the cries of the poor, the cries of the hungry? What would happen? Well, in this story, so spectacular. In this story, there's this little boy. Oh, I love it. Another disciple, Andrew, he comes up and he said, well, here's a little boy. He's got 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, but how far will they go among so many? Pitiful. How pitiful is that? What kind of a God would even ask to take a boy's lunch? What kind of a God? What's God thinking? Is Jesus mean? Why doesn't he just let that kid have lunch and make bread out of rocks? God's God. What's he thinking taking that kid's lunch? I mean, and what's that kid's lunch going to do? Hello, friends. What's it going to do? What's it going to do? What's God going to do with somebody's lunch? There are thousands of people out there. Thousands of people. And somebody said, here's a kid with a lunch. I love this story because I'm a kid with a lunch. So are you. So are you. Yes, a lunch. A lunch. The guy, this little kid, he just said, I'll give my lunch away. Something happened to the mind of that boy, to the heart of that boy. He saw the hungry. And that kid could have seen the hungry, like so many in the Western world, seen the hungry and said, well, my little bit doesn't matter because there are too many people to feed, so I just want to close my eyes and shut my ears. I don't want to see. I don't believe in multiplication. I don't think it matters, and my lunch is absolutely too small. I better gobble it down for myself. But God, in mercy, touched a little boy. I love that it's a little boy. I love that. I love that it's a little boy. One of my favorite things. I'm not taking an offering, so don't get worried. But, shakaraba. One of my favorite offerings, I'll never forget, the tsunami hit. And I was in one of our mud hut churches, desperately poor. And the tsunami hit, and we told these African children and pastors and congregation, we told them, we said, there's been a terrible, terrible tragedy. And we explained this tragedy to them. And these African children and pastors and women just started weeping and just crying out. Oh, and now these people lived in a mud hut with a gourd. They poured water over their head for a bath. Their entire possessions would be a grass mat and an extra t-shirt. But the pastor had a very beautiful thing. He had a pair of shoes. And he treasured these shoes. And these shoes were in a box. And he kept them all wrapped up because they were so precious to him. And he only put them on once in a while for very special occasions. He had this one pair of shoes in his little mud hut. And we share about the tsunami. And I watch these people, these children, these widow women, these old, desperately poor women. And I watched them just crying and they crying and dancing at the same time. And they're dancing and dancing and dancing. And they start bringing potatoes and masaroka and pumpkins. And I'm thinking, how are we going to get that to India? We were going to Chennai. And then here comes a pastor with his little shoes, his beautiful little black shoes. And they're crying and they're just laying this pile of potatoes and bananas and masaroka and these little 1-cent coins. And I just cried. I'm like, God. Some of them taking off their T-shirts, putting them on a pile. I'm thinking, Lord, they have eyes to see. They've never had a television. They don't even have a radio. They have no clue where India is or where we were going in Chennai. None whatsoever. They just heard somebody was hurting.